I had planned on doing a review of the bike you're looking at. This is a 2006 Kawasaki Vulcan 900 Classic LT. I planned on doing a review on it, but I don't have a whole lot of time today, and the weather's not perfect. It's a lot warmer than it's been, but still a little chilly, and as you can probably see, the bike is absolutely filthy. So I'll get it cleaned up when it warms up the next couple of days, and we'll really give it a review. We'll walk around it and take a chance to look around it and get a feel for what it's like to ride one of these things. The Vulcan 900 is a really fantastic beginner's bike, and a lot of people are buying it as their first bike or their first bike in a while. And the reason it's so great is because it's not really a beginner's bike. It's light and easy to maneuver, but it is more than capable of handling long interstate trips, handling the wind, handling adverse weather. It's got big tires, a big wheelbase. It's long, it's got lots of power. So unlike a little 250 or something, it's something that you can actually ride for years and years and years. And plenty of experienced riders who've been riding for a long time will ride this bike. And so the problem, though, is that since there's so many new riders, or returning riders, or intermediate riders looking at the Vulcan 900, a lot of them don't get a chance to really go out and give one a ride before they buy one. So I thought maybe it'd be, kind of a neat thing to ride it around and boy, I'm saying a lot. To ride it around and give you a look and see what it's like to ride it. So I am going to show you a couple of things, a couple of the cons or pros, or however you want to look at it. The first one is that this thing has a monoshock suspension. Now that means that there's one spring behind your butt under the seat. That one spring is all the suspension you've got, except for the front, of course. And that's perfectly okay if the roads are in good condition. But we're going to get up here to a spot where the roads are not in such great condition. It's a steep hill. A lot of people brake on this hill, and over time that's actually caused the asphalt to kind of wrinkle and warp. So we're going to go down that, and we're going to take a look and see what it's like. Let me adjust these mirrors first. I had some speakers mounted that I took off, and I didn't adjust my mirrors correctly. I got a fix tab. What we're going to look at is how it kind of bounces and bumps over these little hills and stuff. Now, a lot of bikes have a monoshock suspension. It's a lot of the older bikes. A lot of Harley Softail line, for example, and this is really meant to go after the Softail as far as Harley goes. And so here we go. So you can kind of see what I'm talking about. We've got suspension, but when we go over these bumps and these ridges and things, you can kind of feel it. It's just not ideal. Dual shock, air shock suspension like you get on a touring frame like the Vulcan 1700, Harley Road Glide, Road King, Ultra Classic, etc., etc. That's where you're going to get a lot better suspension. And honestly, there's one thing I don't like about the bike. It really would be the suspension. Although, roads aren't so bad anymore, and you get out on these roads, it's really just not so bad. The road's in decent condition, you're going to be plenty fine. Here we're still on something that's just a little bit rough, so it's just a little bit stiff in the back. But hopefully in the video it illustrates what I'm talking about. It's not bad suspension, it's definitely not a hardtail, it's definitely not something that you can handle riding all day long. I've ridden it probably 600-700 miles in a day. It's probably the most I've ridden. Not unusual for me to take a 1,000-mile trip in the summer. So, I mean, you can do it, but others can do it better. And that's kind of where the 900's at. If you talk to people who own the 900 and also own other bikes, or who've owned the 900 and have moved on to another bike, they'll tell you that the Vulcan 900 isn't great at anything, but it's good at everything. And what they mean by that is that, certain other bikes can do certain things better. If you're looking strictly at the Kawasaki line, the 1700 Classic, which would be the bigger competitor to this, being the no-fairing kind of basic cruiser, it's going to have dual air shock suspension. It's got an option called the Nomad that has electronic cruise control and hard bags. It's going to have a lot more power. It's going to rev a lot lower on the highway with 6 speeds and a bigger motor. But you're going to have a whole lot more weight, you're going to have a whole lot more cost, you're going to pay more for insurance, you're going to use more fuel. So you trade some things off in order to get those nice touring accoutrements. Alternatively, you could get a smaller, lighter, and even easier ride bike, but then you're going to give up the ability to comfortably ride long distances like you've got on the 900. So it really is a perfect in-the-middle bike. And I did buy this bike a couple years ago as my first bike. Put 20,000 miles on it. And I have no desire right now to move on to something else or get rid of it. Just because it does everything well, it does everything I want it to do. Maybe one day I'll look at, Harley touring bike or a Vulcan 1700 or, the Vulcan 2000 is a really cool bike. Unfortunately, they don't really make a really nice touring bike out of the Vulcan 2000, which is a shame. I would love to have electronic cruise control and hard bags and that sort of thing, which can be added, but it'd be nice if it came from the factory and got the nice factory cruise controls. And when I say cruise control, I mean electronic cruise control. These guys sell these little things, these little throttle locks that lock your throttle in one position and they call it cruise control. That's not cruise control. Cruise control adjusts your speed, adjusts your throttle automatically to keep your speed. A throttle lock just locks your throttle in one position. There's a pretty tremendous difference, if you ask me. So you see the snow's melting here. We got 15 inches of snow on Sunday. It was a record. The St. Louis area, which we're a bit of ways from St. Louis, as you can see, there's not a lot of cows in St. Louis. But this area typically gets 6 to 8 inches, maybe 12 inches of snow in an entire year. And that's usually in December and January. Usually I can ride all year round comfortably. It doesn't really get below 50 or 40 most days, except for a couple little peaks here in December and January. But Sunday in March, towards the end of March, we got 15 inches of snow. And that was on top of already exceeding our usual amount of snow. Last year, I think we only got 3 or 4 inches of snow. So it's been a crazy year. But it's 60 degrees right now. The snow is melting. There's just so much of it that you still see some of it on the ground. So what we're going to do is we're going to get up here, and there's an interstate highway up here, hiding in the trees up here. And, I've still got a turn signal on. Whoops. I've got a beeper to remind me, but it didn't remind me. Now, this is a 5-speed bike, but it's a high revving bike, about an 8,000 RPM redline. And the problem with that is it's designed to rev high. Now, if you're a sport bike rider considering transitioning to a cruiser, you're probably not going to be bothered at all by this. But if you've ridden other cruisers or all you've driven as a car, it is going to be a little different. You're going to have to get used to a lot higher revs on the highway. Now, I want you to watch the mirrors, especially the left mirror, the one you can see that's adjusted right. Because what you're going to notice is vibration as we accelerate onto the highway, but then it smooths out as we get on the highway. And that's what matters. It's smooth. It's comfortable. It's something you can ride. But you're going to hear, with your ears, a really fast revving engine on the highway, which is not nearly as fast as, say like a Ninja 250 or something. You're turning about 4,000 RPMs. But when a lot of other cruisers are running 2,000, 2,500 RPMs, it's pretty buzzy. There we are in 5th gear. We're in top gear. Get over here. There's 65 miles an hour. I'll hold that for a second. We'll rev up to 70. So you can see from the mirrors and stuff, there's no vibration. It's very smooth. But you can kind of see, that little part of your brain that tells you when to shift is telling you to shift right now, isn't it? So that's the part you're going to have to get used to if you're riding a 900 long distances on the interstate. You're running 4,000 plus RPMs on the interstate. Now, that's not really that bad, and in fact, that's just about right. If you look at a big Harley twin that's got a 5,000 RPM redline and runs 2,500 RPMs on the highway versus this 900cc twin that runs 8,000 RPMs redline and 4,000 RPMs on the highway, it's just about right, but it's a short stroke motor. It's a very small motor compared to what the giant V-twins that are being produced right now. So it revs pretty high on the highway. You've got to get used to that. Something to consider. Personally, it doesn't bother me in the least. The only time it does bother me and we'll demonstrate this too, is, I don't really particularly like the interstate. It's kind of boring. So a lot of times I'll do this. I'll take these outer roads, and you can't really tell because Missouri didn't do a great job of preserving it, but we're actually on historic Route 66 right now, from Chicago to LA. And so we can take this, get up to 55 miles an hour, which is the speed limit. I'm going to shift it to 5th. And this truck's going a little slower, so we can't do 55, but this is a nice sound, a nice tone, a nice RPM to be riding. You cruise along at 50, 55 miles an hour, it's perfect. You're not burning a lot of fuel. You handle really well. But if you do this for a couple of hours, and then you hop on the interstate, then it gets a little annoying because you've gotten kind of used to this tone. And what it really is, there's no vibration. You're not hurting the engine or anything. It is designed to run like that. But it's that part of your brain that tells you when to shift is saying, you need to shift, you need to shift, you need to shift. And especially if you're new to the bike, you're going to find yourself grabbing that clutch and trying to shift. And a lot of people say, oh, it needs a 6th gear. It has nothing to do with having a 6th gear. It needs a lower final gear ratio is what it needs. But the reason it's like that is because, it makes its power in the mid to high range. This is not a low RPM torque monstering cruiser. This is really a lot more like a sport bike in the terms of the way it makes power. It makes a lot of horsepower and it makes it in the high RPMs. Now, it's not going to compete with a liter bike, a 4-cylinder liter bike, but it does pretty well for a V-twin. So when you're running 4,000 RPMs on the highway, you're in the power band. You can pass people. You can be cruising at 80 miles an hour and then rack the throttle open and pass somebody if you just feel like you need to. So that's why it's designed like that. But most of us don't really need power beyond 75 or 80, although it's nice to have in a pucker situation, in an emergency, to be able to move quickly to get out of a situation. There are some things you can do, though. Scootworks and Cobra make pulleys, front and rear, that drop the final gear ratio. And you can also put a bigger tire on the rear. A lot of people will run, a larger diameter tire that will fit right on the factory rim. It will fit within the wheel center. No modification required. You can stick a larger diameter tire on the back. That's probably the cheapest thing you can do because you're going to need a rear tire anyway. I've gone through a couple already. And so you stick a rear tire on it that's bigger, that drops the RPMs. You stick a couple pulleys on there, that drops the RPMs. Now, of course, you're thinking, well, then your speedometer's going to be way off. Well, here's the problem. The speedometer's already off. I'm reading 55 miles an hour. I'm probably doing 48 to 50. So the side effect of dropping the RPMs is that you actually drop the speedometer down to be a little bit more accurate. Instrumentation is not super accurate on this bike. The fuel gauge for another one is very inaccurate. Again, that doesn't bother me because I guess I come from an age where bikes didn't have gas gauges, and the only reason this one does is because it's fuel injected and because you don't have a reserve to flip to. And so, a lot of people are kind of used to being able to reach down and flip to reserve when it starts to sputter. Well, when this one starts to sputter, you better go off the road because it's dead. That's all you got. There's a fuel filter, so you don't have to worry about the fuel injectors going bad, but it is potentially possible to harm the fuel pump or the fuel injectors by running it out of gas. I wouldn't recommend it. So the fuel gauge is there, and I suspect that a lot of folks don't realize that being fuel injected, it is different than a carbureted bike. Let's get in your lane, buddy. And so Kawasaki's put this way underestimating fuel gauge on the bike to kind of give people an idea, hey, you need to get gas, because it's showing me almost on empty, but if we switch over to my trip odometer here, that I forgot to reset, never mind, don't look at that, I can probably go another 100 miles. I mean, you can go about 300 miles on a tank. And I got gas early last time because I hadn't ridden this thing in a couple of weeks because of all the snow and weather. So the last time I got gas, I had probably 3/4 of a tank, but I dumped some seafoam in there and filled up a little bit just to make sure I had fresh gas in there. But you can go 250 to 300 miles on a tank depending on how you're riding. 50-ish miles to the gallon is what I typically get. Highway, there's a conference I go to in Springfield every year. I've gone to Springfield several times on this. Springfield, Missouri is about 200 miles from me, heading this direction west. If I go to the interstate the entire way, I can make it in one trip and go another 60 or 70 miles when I'm in Springfield before I need gas, and average in the mid-50s. But it actually does better on these roads. It actually has better gas mileage, 55 to 60 miles an hour. And out where I live, there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of 55 and 60 mile an hour roads, a lot of state highways. It's fairly rural, so I get pretty good gas mileage because of that. So when I do the review of the bike, I want to hear in the comments below what you guys would like to see. But when I do the review of the bike, I'll touch again on the suspension and the highway, the two negatives to the bike, but I'll also touch a little bit more on some of the more positive things, like its handling, its power, its looks. I mean, it's a great looking bike. We'll touch on maintenance, pros and cons there. It's an easy to maintain bike, but of course there are some maintenance items that you have to do on this bike that you don't have to do on others, namely valve adjustments. Many of the bigger engines do not require any valve adjustments. No Harleys require valve adjustments, but this motor does require every 15,000 miles that you shim the valves because there is no automatic valve adjuster. It's an overhead cam engine. Big overhead cam though, Kawasaki has done some things to make it super easy. The rocker arms, for example, have a spring on them that just move right out of the way. You just push it right out of the way. And it's super easy. But it's something you have to do on this bike you don't have to do on others. We'll also touch on things like its braking performance. Won't show that off too much right now because I got a car behind me, but you know, if you know what you're doing, it'll stop. But you need to know what you're doing. We'll talk about things to look for in a used Vulcan 900. What kind of things you need to watch out for if you're considering buying one. Not much to talk about for a new Vulcan 900 because it won't be any different than a used one, but of course there's things to watch for in a used one. One of the problems with a smaller bike is that they're often not maintained very well by the previous owners, but these are dead reliable bikes. So on the VulcanForums.com, there's a member by the name of Big Toe, very creative name there, who's pushing 200,000 miles on his. So, and these have only been out since 06, the classic anyway. I think the custom came out in 05, 06, I don't remember. But, you know, he's pushing 200,000 miles on an 09, 07, something like that. Lots of other people are pushing 50 plus. It's a reliable bike. It's going to go wherever you want it to go. So I'm going to find a place to turn around. I may leave the camera rolling and throw some footage in there. I don't really have anything else to talk about, though. But shoot me a question in the comments below if you're interested, and when it warms up, say a week or so, I'll actually get done and do a review of this bike, and I'll actually get out there and, and kind of review it. And I'll get off the bike too, and I'll show you around. And I'm also going to do a video, and I'm going to, you know, next time I do the oil change, valve adjustments, etc., I'm going to try and do some videos of that. Kind of walk you guys through it. Those of you who own the 900. We're considering the 900. Want to see what maintenance goes into it if you like to do it yourself instead of paying the ridiculous dealer prices.